My beloved child, stop scrolling. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you before you move on with your day. Something has happened, something you cannot see yet, something connected to a person whose name may still live quietly inside your heart. Your soulmate needs to talk to you, and the urgency you feel right now is not something you need to fear. It is the feeling of a story moving after a long period of silence. It is the feeling that something hidden has finally reached the surface. So stay with these words, do not rush, because there is a reason you found this message now, at this particular moment, when your mind may have been somewhere completely different. Perhaps you were thinking about your future. Perhaps you were trying to forget someone. Perhaps you had finally convinced yourself that the chapter was over, and then, somehow, you arrived here. My beloved child, I want you to understand something before I reveal what has changed. Your soulmate has been carrying a conversation inside their heart for longer than you know, a conversation they have never had the courage to finish. They have imagined speaking to you, they have imagined hearing your voice again, they have imagined what your face would look like if they stood before you and finally told you everything they kept hidden, but each time they came close to taking action, something stopped them: fear, pride, uncertainty, regret, the fear that you might have moved on, the fear that you might no longer care, the fear that they might reach toward you and discover that the door they once left open is now closed. But something happened recently, and that fear is no longer stronger than their need for the truth. That is why this message feels different. That is why I am asking you to listen carefully. Something shifted. Not months from now, not someday. In an imaginary future, something has already begun. You may not have physical evidence yet, but your heart may have sensed the change before your eyes could recognize it. Have you noticed the sudden memories? The strange moments when this person appears in your thoughts without invitation, the dreams that feel unusually vivid, the song that suddenly carries a meaning it never had before, the feeling that you are somehow standing at the edge of an unfinished conversation. Do not become consumed by signs. Do not chase coincidences, but notice what your heart is telling you about yourself. Because there is something your soulmate has finally realized, they cannot keep running from the truth. For a long time, they believed distance would make everything easier. They thought that if enough time passed, the emotions would become quieter. They thought new routines would replace old memories. They thought they could simply continue forward, but then something happened that they did not expect. They were reminded of you, not deliberately, not because they searched for you. You simply appeared in their world through an unexpected doorway. Perhaps it was a photograph, perhaps a familiar place, perhaps a name, perhaps someone mentioned something that only the two of you would understand. Maybe it was something as ordinary as a melody playing in the background, and suddenly, everything they had buried came rushing back. For a few seconds, they were no longer in the present. They were back in that moment with you. They remembered the sound of your voice. They remembered how you looked when you were trying not to smile. They remembered a conversation they had almost forgotten, and then they remembered something much more painful, the moment they chose silence when they should have chosen honesty. That memory stayed with them. It followed them after the moment passed. They tried to distract themselves, but the question had already entered their mind. What if I made the wrong choice? My beloved child, there are questions that can be ignored for years, but once the heart becomes ready to answer them, those questions become impossible to escape. Your soulmate has reached that place. They are looking backward, not because they want to live in the past, because they are finally trying to understand the past. They are examining what happened between you. They are reconsidering things they once believed were settled. They are remembering conversations from your perspective. They are realizing that something you said may have meant more than they understood at the time. And perhaps the most painful realization is that you may have been asking for something very simple: clarity, consistency, truth. You were not asking for perfection. You were asking to know where you stood, and they did not know how to give you that answer. Maybe they were wounded, maybe they were afraid of commitment, maybe they were carrying experiences they never explained, maybe they had convinced themselves that keeping their emotions hidden was safer than allowing themselves to be vulnerable. Whatever the reason, their silence created a wound, and they know it now. They know that some of the pain between you was not caused by a lack of feeling, it was caused by a lack of courage. That realization has changed them, but there is something even bigger. They have begun to understand what your absence actually means. When you were present, they could take your presence for granted. When you became distant, they discovered the space you had occupied in their emotional world. They noticed that there were things they wanted to tell you, little things, important things, random things, moments when something happened and their first instinct was to share it with you. Then reality reminded them that you were no longer there in the same way. That realization hurt, because it revealed something they had been avoiding. You were not merely someone they had known, you had become part of the way they experienced life, and losing that connection created a silence they could not replace. They may have tried, they may have talked to other people, they may have stayed busy, they may have told themselves they were completely fine. But there is a difference between being distracted and being healed. They were distracted, now they are healing, and healing has brought them back to the truth. My beloved child, this is why I do not want you to mistake their previous silence for the entire story. Silence was one chapter, it was not necessarily the ending. But neither should you assume that every return is automatically meant to become forever. You have learned too much for that. You have grown too much for that. If this person comes back into your life, they must meet the person you have become. They cannot ask you to become the old version of yourself, the version who waited endlessly, the version who over-explained, the version who accepted uncertainty because the alternative felt like losing them. That person has changed, you have changed, and your soulmate can feel that change, even from a distance. There is something about your energy now that they cannot explain. You are quieter, stronger, less willing to chase, less willing to prove. You may still care, but you no longer want to lose yourself in the process of caring, and somehow, they know it. Perhaps they saw a glimpse of your life, perhaps they heard something about you, perhaps they simply sensed that you were no longer waiting in the same way, and that realization created urgency, because there is a terrifying thought inside them now. What if I wait too long? For the first time, they understand that you are not frozen in time. You are moving forward. Your life is moving forward. Opportunities are moving forward. Other people may notice you. Other possibilities may find you. And suddenly, the person who once believed there would always be another chance is realizing that another chance is never guaranteed. That realization can awaken courage, but it can also awaken panic, and this is where you must be careful. Do not let someone else's urgency become your instability. If they are meant to speak, let them speak. If they are ready to explain, let them explain. If they are ready to apologize, let the apology come from their own heart. You do not need to pull the truth out of them. You do not need to chase the confession. You do not need to become their emotional rescue. Love should meet you halfway, and something about your soulmate is beginning to understand that. They know that if they reach you, they cannot come with vague promises. They cannot simply say, "I miss you," and expect the past to disappear. They know there are questions. They know there are wounds. They know there are things they must acknowledge. And there is one particular thing they are afraid you will ask. Why did you leave when you knew you cared? They have imagined answering you. Sometimes they have no answer. Sometimes they think they have one. But beneath every explanation is the same truth. They were afraid of what loving you would require, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of losing control, afraid that you would see the parts of them they did not want anyone to see. And perhaps they were afraid that if they truly allowed themselves to love you, they could truly be hurt by you. So they protected themselves, and in protecting themselves, they hurt you. That is the paradox they now have to face. The wall they built to keep pain out also kept love out. And now they are standing on the other side of that wall, wondering whether you are still there. My beloved child, I want you to hear something deeply important. You are not responsible for whether they become brave. You are not responsible for their healing. You are not responsible for their regret. You are not responsible for making their return possible. Your responsibility is to remain true to yourself. If their path leads toward you, let them walk it. If their heart needs to speak, give them the dignity of speaking for themselves. But do not abandon your peace to wait for a sentence that has not yet been spoken, because there is something even more powerful happening in your life. While you have been wondering about them, you have been becoming someone they may not recognize. Your loneliness taught you something. Your disappointment taught you something. The ending taught you something. The silence taught you something. You learned how to sit with yourself. You learned how to survive unanswered questions. You learned that your worth does not rise and fall according to another person's attention. You learned that being deeply loving does not mean being endlessly available. You learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting. And perhaps most importantly, you learned that you can miss someone and still choose yourself. That is strength. That is maturity. That is why the next chapter, whatever form it takes, will be different, because you are different, and your soulmate is beginning to understand that. They have been asking themselves whether they are worthy of another opportunity, not whether you are worthy of them. That is the change. Once, they assumed your love would be there. Now they are wondering whether they deserve it. That question has humbled them. And something happened recently that made it impossible for them to continue pretending otherwise. They heard something, they saw something, they discovered something, and it touched the exact wound they had been avoiding. It made them realize that you may actually be moving beyond the emotional place where they left you. They may have discovered that you are happier, that you are becoming more confident, that you are building a life that no longer revolves around the question of whether they will return, and instead of making them forget you, it made them realize how much they respect the person you are becoming. There is a strange kind of beauty in that. When someone realizes they no longer possess a place in your life automatically, they finally understand the value of being invited into it. They are no longer thinking, I can come back whenever I want. They are thinking, if I come back, I have to come back correctly. That is a profound difference, and it is why the energy around this connection has changed. But there is more, much more. Because your soulmate is not simply thinking about talking to you. They have already imagined the conversation. They have imagined the first few seconds. They have imagined the awkward silence. They have imagined whether you will smile, whether you will be cold, whether you will ask them why they disappeared, whether you will tell them that you missed them. They have imagined hearing your voice say their name again. And every time they imagine it, something inside them becomes painfully aware of what they lost. But then comes the question that stops them: what if they say no? That question has kept their hand from reaching out, until something happened. Something changed the balance. Something made the fear of losing you permanently greater than the fear of being rejected, and that is where the urgency begins, because there is a difference between someone casually remembering you and someone realizing they may never have another opportunity to speak. Your soulmate is approaching that realization. They are no longer simply asking whether you remember them. They are asking whether they have enough courage to find out, and perhaps they have already begun. Perhaps there has been a search, a message drafted and deleted, a profile opened, a number typed and erased, a mutual connection quietly considered, a place revisited. A question asked without revealing the real reason behind it. Something has been happening, something small enough for the world to overlook, but significant enough to change the direction of this story. And here is the part that may surprise you. The event that pushed them toward you was not romantic. It was emotional. It touched a part of their life where they suddenly understood what truly matters. Maybe someone they cared about gave them advice. Maybe they experienced an ending. Maybe they watched someone else lose an opportunity to say goodbye. Maybe they realized how quickly circumstances can change. Whatever happened, it confronted them with one terrifying truth. You cannot always assume tomorrow will give you another chance to say what you should have said today. That thought stayed with them. It followed them into the night, and eventually, they asked themselves, if I never speak to them again, will I regret it? The answer came immediately, yes. That answer frightened them, because now the silence had a cost. Before, staying silent felt safe. Now staying silent feels like losing you forever, and that is why they need to talk. Not because heaven wants you to become obsessed, not because you should abandon your life waiting for a message, but because sometimes truth arrives after two people have spent enough time hiding from it. And your soulmate has spent enough time hiding. They are reaching a threshold, a moment where something must be decided. Either they continue carrying the weight of everything unsaid, or they finally step forward, and there is something about their next move that you need to know. It may not begin with the words you expect. They may not immediately confess everything. They may test the waters. They may send something simple. They may ask how you are. They may mention something from the past. They may pretend the message is casual, but underneath those words will be a question they are too afraid to ask directly. Is there still a place for me in your life? And your response, if that moment comes, should not come from old pain. It should come from who you are now. Do not answer because you are lonely. Do not answer because you are afraid they will disappear again. Do not answer because you want proof that they still care. Answer only from truth, because the person you have become deserves a relationship built on truth. And my beloved child, there is another secret buried beneath their hesitation. They have been comparing every connection after you to what they felt with you, not necessarily consciously, but emotionally. They have discovered that chemistry is not the same as safety, attention is not the same as intimacy, attraction is not the same as understanding. And being around someone is not the same as feeling seen by them. You gave them something they did not know how to value at the time. You gave them emotional familiarity, a place where they could breathe, and when that place disappeared, they realized how rare it had been. That is why they keep returning to the memory, not because they are trapped in nostalgia, because they are trying to understand what that connection meant. And they are beginning to understand, but understanding is only the beginning. Action is what matters now. There is a message coming closer, a conversation that has been delayed, a truth that has been waiting, and you may think you know what they want to say. You may think it is simply, I miss you. But it is deeper than that. They want to tell you what happened after you left. They want to explain why they became distant. They want to tell you what they were afraid of. They want to admit something they have never been able to say without feeling exposed. And that admission could change the way you remember everything. Because there is one event from the time you were apart that you know nothing about. An event they have kept hidden. An event that made them realize just how deeply you had entered their heart, an event that happened unexpectedly, on an ordinary day, when they believed they had finally moved on, and when it happened, they heard a sentence that stopped them completely, a sentence that made them think of you immediately. A sentence that forced them to confront the possibility that they had walked away from something they were never emotionally finished with. They have never forgotten that moment, and now, they are wondering whether to tell you, because if they tell you, they will have to reveal something vulnerable. Something that could make you understand them in a way you never did before, something that could explain the silence, something that could also break your heart. And this is where I need you to remain calm, because the truth is coming closer, but it may not arrive in the form you imagine.